I think the central problem, the central issue before India at 65, for we are now 65 years old as an independent country, is that whereas at the start we assumed that both democracy and development are desirable and can be secured together, increasingly we are facing a dilemma of democracy and development. And the reason for that is that as our economy grows faster and faster, as it has been doing particularly in the last decade or so, we've discovered that higher growth leads to wider inequalities, and that a lot of the development process involves disruption, illustrated by the fact that by about 65 million tribal Indians have been displaced as a result of development based on attempting to discover minerals and use timber. Now, in these circumstances, democracy, which has become a grounded reality in India, where people have had the experience of 15 parliamentary elections, about 100 or more state assembly elections, and hundreds of thousands of local body elections, they've discovered that in our democracy, it indeed is true that the government is elected by the masses. And they've also discovered that when it comes to votes, there is a perfect equality, that everybody has a vote and nobody has more than one vote. But the development process has been such, and is inevitably going to continue to be such, that while everyone has one vote, only some have most notes, most currency notes. And in these circumstances, we have to find an answer in reconciling the growth of GDP with its impact upon the people. Whereas GDP has been growing at over 8% per annum, poverty alleviation has recorded only under 0.8% per annum. In other words, India is prospering, but Indians are not. And because Indians are not prospering, the only upside to that is that as a result of the global economic crisis, the richest Indians are suffering a dent in their income and wealth. But when your poverty is being alleviated at the rate of 0.8% per annum, the impact of the crisis on lowering that from 0.8 to 0.6 or 0.2 even is barely perceptible. But that's the only upside to it. For the rest, there is a sense that we are not getting our due, we are not getting our share. And I think that's reflected in the unfortunate fact that about 1/3 of the districts of India, most of which are tribal districts in the deep forests, are consumed by insurgency, either partial or total. And that elsewhere in the country, there is a sense of dissatisfaction about what we've succeeded in getting. For while the economy is on a high trajectory of growth, large numbers of Indians, perhaps 1 billion Indians, have not either got onto that trajectory or have in fact been pushed off that trajectory. So whether it is in terms of additional employment generated, or additional income made available to the poor, or additional growth in the sector that employs most Indians, that is the agricultural sector, being significant, all of that is almost non-existent compared to the amazing growth of the IT sector. The IT sector is very good for earning foreign exchange, but how many Indians can it employ? Directly, I think the figure is about 6 million Indians today. Indirectly, perhaps 10 million Indians, out of a workforce that runs to hundreds of millions of Indians. Now in India, all figures seem huge to non-Indian eyes, particularly European eyes. For if we do have, as it is claimed, about 200 million Indians who have enough money in their pockets to be able to at least look at a Gucci bag, even if they can't quite buy it, 200 million is equal to the total population of Germany, France, and the United Kingdom put together. And so, India is very attractive at Davos to investors and to those who are looking for markets. And that's how we've become a kind of ice cream cone on which everybody is taking a lick. But the consequences of this kind of globalization-driven growth is that while 200 million Indians have certainly benefited, and possibly this figure goes up to 300 million, between 900 million and 1 billion Indians are not in the marketplace. And democracy is meant to serve them, whereas growth cannot but serve the small minority in proportionate terms who are on that high growth trajectory. Now, in these circumstances, serious questions are being raised as to whether we could not have growth along with social justice. And it would appear from the Gini coefficients that are now being measured that in this period of 5 years, when we have averaged more than 8% growth, the Gini coefficient in urban India has virtually doubled. In other words, there is a doubling of inequality at a period when we are growing fast and are admired by the rest of the world for growing so fast. This is possible to maintain the social equilibrium in a dictatorship where the voice of the people is suppressed. But in a really lively democracy such as we have in India, where elections must come every 5 years and often come even quicker, the political class cannot escape its responsibility to the people at large. In other words, to the people who have not benefited from growth. So while growth may be the necessary condition to generate the resources that would be required for subsidizing their living and providing them with education, health, and other elements of the social sectors, there too there has been this huge disappointment that whereas between 1994, and I'll tell you in a minute why I'm picking 1994, whereas between 1994 and the latest fiscal year, we have had a 24 times increase in the expenditure made on the social sectors. 24 times. No other country in the world can match it. Our position on the UN Human Development Index continues to be virtually the same as it was in 1994 when the UN HDI was first published. So what we need, I think, as a solution to this problem of development and democracy is to ensure that democracy is the means used for delivering public goods and services to the people in the villages in which they live and in the urban slums where they live. And to do that, we have to have a complete change of mindset, which says that those two elements of our democracy who have been privileged by our constitutional provisions over the last 60 years, namely Parliament, the politicians in Parliament and in the state assemblies, will have to agree to being disempowered to a certain extent in favor of the 3.2 million elected representatives we have in our local bodies. And the bureaucracy has to agree that instead of being the instrument of delivery, the instrument of delivery will become the people's representatives themselves. So the solution is at hand, but there's an evident lack of political will to move in the direction of that solution and to instead just concentrate on growing faster and faster. But since growing faster and faster also means making inequality wider and wider and wider, I think we are endangering both our democracy and our development if we don't bring growth together with social equity.